Next is a great honor to present a current member of the Board of Trustees for the Parliament of the World's Religions. Ahmad is the Director of Interfaith Engagement and the Muslim chaplain at the Northwestern University. So, please.
Greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum, shalom alaikum. I know that you all have been here the entire evening, and I am basically the last speaker, so hold on tight. I'm going to put my script away and speak to you from my heart with extemp style, if that's okay. So I loved how Phyllis shared stories. And I want to tell you just a little bit about my story when it comes to this concept of reconciliation as a Muslim living in transmodernity, as a Muslim female, a Desi American Muslim female. My parents were physicians. My father's a physician. We traveled all over the world. We settled in the United States. I lived in the inner city. I grew up playing street basketball with Latino and Black men. We moved to the suburbs when my parents decided that they wanted for me to retain my faith values. So for those of you who have been to like a JDS, a Jewish day school, or a Catholic school, you may relate to this idea that I felt a little bit indoctrinated to the faith tradition when I was a young girl. I fasted in Ramadan because everybody else was fasting. I was, praying 5 times a day because everybody else was around me. All the young Muslim children were praying 5 times a day. I wore this hijab because everyone else was doing it. I don't think I understood my faith tradition until it came time for me to go to high school. And I begged my parents to send me to a public high school and not a private, Islamic school. And the story went something like, I don't want to get to know just Sarah and Khadija and Ahmed and Ali. I want to get to know the Stacys and the Kims and the Jacobs and Jasons. And Dad wasn't really cool with the Jacobs and Jasons. Although I, did share that my first crush was a Jew, but don't tweet that. Yeah, I think he's going to watch this later. So I went to Niles West High School, one of the most diverse schools in the state of Illinois at the time. And, in order to fit in, I was the only other girl in the entire body of 4,000 students, including the women, who wore a hijab. So in order to fit in, I played varsity basketball, because I played street basketball. I knew the game. I played volleyball, and I ran track. And I thought I really fit in. And, the young people in high school didn't ask me questions about my faith. They just knew I knew how to play the game. They called me Ninja Girl. So everything was great. It was wonderful until 9/11 happened. 9/11 occurred in my senior year of high school. And the same referee who had seen me play in the Central Suburban League for the last 3 years stopped the game at 1:34 seconds left into the clock. The same referee who would tell me after games, hey, there are recruiters out here for you. The same referee who would give me air high fives stopped the game at 1:34 seconds left into the fourth quarter and said, number 33, you're in violation of the IHSA Illinois Rules for Uniform Code and Conduct. He was essentially questioning whether I could play with all of my garbs, right? And my coach, who is a devout Christian, got on the sideline. And I heard words like bigotry. I heard him say, not in this game, not on my court. We have all the paperwork to prove that she can wear what she's wearing. And I, said to him, Coach, we're winning by 12 points. It's okay. And he said, no, it's about principle, Tahera. It's about principle. So I was let back into the game, and after we did the sportsmanship handshake, one of the parents walked down from the bleachers and said, number 33. I turned around, and he said, it's a shame they let you back in. It's a shame they let all of you into this country. I hurried back to the locker room, hoping my teammates would say something in terms of this idea that, okay, they're going to restore or reconcile some of what just happened. No, the locker rooms were silent. The high school was entirely silent after that. A young man decided on the football court one day, or the field, that he was going to pull off my hijab, tore my hijab off, spat in my face, and said, BITCH, I know why you didn't want to date me. It's because you were effing bin Laden. Very, very sad, strange things happened, which I don't have time to share all of that with you. And I was so deeply depressed with this idea that somehow I was affiliated with a tradition that was causing all this rancor in the world, turmoil in the world. And I was often asked to be the spokesperson for so many Muslims, 1.7 billion of them. So after high school, I decided to work at a pharmacy. And it was a private pharmacy owned by a Jewish man. One day, I wasn't filling pills, I was at the front, and a woman came to get her medication. When I went to give her her medication, she leaned over me and said to my boss, "Mark, I am not taking my pills from this rag-headed Muslim girl." I saw my boss go to the front, thank her 3 times. He said, "No, thank you. Thank you. Thank you." And I was sitting in the corner thinking, why is my Jewish boss saying thank you to this woman? So my colleagues told me later that he said, "Thank you for your business for the last 16 years, but if you mistreat any of my employees, you are not welcome." Then he came back to me and said, "Are you okay? Do you need to go home?" I said, No, I'm okay. And he said, "Why don't you come over for Shabbat?" And that was my first Shabbat. And at the Shabbat table, he said something very profound to me. He said, "Tahera, I didn't grow up in Chicago. I grew up down south in a very small town where every day young men would line us up, some of the young Jewish boys, and ask, are you a Jew? Are you a Jew? Are you a Jew?" And he said, "I lived in fear. I grew up not sharing my identity." And he said, "I don't want you to have to grow up like that." So I sat there in many ways feeling this sense of deep restoration of my own identity. First through this basketball coach who was a devout Christian, and then through this Jewish man. But I was really broken. And I thought, this world needs so much restoration, and Muslims, particularly Muslims, are in that place where they are constantly having to explain to people what their faith is and what it's not. And so as I stand before you today, I have to reflect to my own journey and think, where has that journey taken me? My mentor at the time said, "I know you want to give up, but you need to be more like MJ." And I said, "I already got hops." She said, "No, not Michael Jordan." She meant Moses and Jonah, Prophet Moses and Jonah. And she said, "Look, in the Quran, in our holy text, Moses is charged to first do some self-reflection, self-work when it comes to reconciliation." So he does that in a land called the Median, right? And then he goes back to Egypt, and the Quran says to him, "Go back to Pharaoh and فَقُولَ لَهُ قَوْلًا لَيِّنًا." Go back and speak to Pharaoh in a language that is malleable, that he can understand. Perhaps he will understand what you're saying. And then Jonah, when he's cast into the whale, he's doing deep self-reflection. He's asking God for forgiveness. So that is what my journey, was like, basically, for the last 15 years. Until a few years ago. So I did a lot of interfaith work, a lot of reconciliation work. You can read all about it online. But I want to share with you a pivotal story, and I know I have very, very little time. When I was in Afghanistan, I was sent there on behalf of the State Department, and I did a lot of reconciliation work with NGO groups, women's rights groups. And then I also visited little madrasas. Now, madrasas are like midrashes. But for many young people, it's the only place they get their meals for the entire day. And my job was to talk about what our holy text says about violence and nonviolence, right? And to really talk about the love of God and to cherish this idea of loving the other and restoring the faith of others. And so that's what I did. I went to many madrasas, and I spoke to young people. And then in one of my talks, folks, a young man, maybe 13, 14 years old, got up. And he started speaking in Dari. And I asked the translator, what is he saying? Please tell me. And the translator would not translate. And this young man kept going and going. And I said, "Please translate what he is saying." He wouldn't translate. The young man pointed to the sky, pointed to me, pointed to the people, and then he walked away. So after the program, I begged the translator and I said, "What did this young man say?" And he said, "I don't think you're ready for it." I said, "Okay." The day I left Afghanistan, I begged him to tell me what this young man said. And he said, "Okay, as long as you promise me to sit with it." I said, "Okay, I'll do that. I'll do that. I think I got this." And he said, the young man said, "You come here from one of the most privileged nations in the world. You have food in your stomach every night. You have a roof over your head. You take up the nation's resources, the entire world's resources, and you come here to tell me about God. God died the day my mother died of a drone attack. God died the day that my father died because of the injuries. And God, where is God when my little brother, my baby brother, died because there was no one to take care of him and I couldn't do it myself? He said, you talk about the love of God and the love of God's people. Where are they? I remember on the plane ride home, I was thinking to myself, I've been doing this work, this whole idea of interfaith and some of the kumbaya work, as people call it, the falafel and hummus work. But what do I do? Yes, what do I do with those of us who have been deeply traumatized and they have nothing to lose? How do I do reconciliation work within our own internal communities when this is their reality? And I came to realize that my dream, my American dream, came at the expense of their nightmares. So I continued to search for answers. And I realized that some of us will continue to have that privilege and work with each other towards what we believe is God's work. And then there are those who need healing, and they need that space, and it's okay. But ultimately, we need to be those healers for each other. Because reconciliation, folks, I believe starts with listening to the story, to understand the story, resilient listening. And it's this deep understanding that what is being shared is the lived reality and experiences of people. And so when Chris, shared in the beginning that this is not just about love, this is about justice. And understanding each other's stories and giving each of us the acknowledgement of that story is absolutely the beginning of where reconciliation happens. The positive end of what happens 3 years after I meet this young man is I'm sitting again in a home owned by a Jewish woman and her convert husband to Judaism. And we're having a Shabbat meal. And there's a young man at the table. There are 3 foster kids at that table. And this couple, this beautiful couple, who has done amazing work, not reconciliation work on big stages, but in the lives of individuals. When I see a young man, I ask the foster couple, where is he from? And they told me the story, that he's from Afghanistan. And he didn't speak English, so he was quiet the entire time. But before I left that home, he said, God is here. He said, God is here. What did it take to restore his faith? It took humans. It took people. The light of God is in all of us. And we continue to do this work of God. It starts with understanding the stories of people. It's with who this person is. What is their story? And then to continue to know that in order for us to heal, we must do God's work. We are representatives of God. So the Quran talks about this a great deal. This is the Marrakesh document that Muslims, scholars have signed on together, which represents the verses in the Quran. In 2016, I was asked to share this all with you, that this is the document that many Muslim scholars together around the world have signed on to say that Muslims around the world will stand for each other. We will stand for what is good, what is right, and that we will stand for those who are hurt and listen and to find the root causes and then to heal each other through them. I'm going to end with the verse of the Quran, if you allow me. It's a recitation. It'll allow us to, I think, end with a blessing as well. It's a verse in the Quran that says, O people, we have created you from a male and female into nations and tribes so that you may get to know one another. And verily the most noble of you are those who are conscientious of each other and conscientious of the divine. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعل بينكم إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلكم قبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير. صدق الله العظيم.